Rivals of Aether is an absolute masterpiece of a platform fighter. But to explain to you why, I'll have to explain to you what a platform fighter is. Mario is an incredible game franchise that revolutionized and originated the platformer genre, granting you free movement that never makes you feel restricted. Now take that incredibly dynamic movement and put it into a fighting game. What's special about platform fighters is what I call spatial control. Platform fighters emphasize movement, area control, and thoughtful play above everything else. Instead of having a zero to death combo like in Marvel vs. Capcom, you don't get combos in the same way as other fighting games. You have to think about what angle your move would send someone and how far, which varies wildly depending on percent. This is all taking place in the span of a couple of seconds, by the way. Also, I would like to quickly add, I have no problem with normal fighting games, okay? I play Skullgirls and Main Hospital, but it's fine. Now that I've told you what a platform fighter is, you can finally know what Rivals of Aether is. Rivals is an indie game created by Dan Finesi. He was originally working on a game called Killer Instinct, which was a Microsoft exclusive fighting game. He later quit Microsoft and started development on his very own fighting game. This would prove to be the beginning of an incredible franchise. Since he knew exactly how to take advantage of everything the platform fighter genre has to offer, he made moves that don't just do flat damage but instead made you think about movement and spatial control. He made you think at a faster pace and never let you slow down by having quick interactions that cost you the game. If you're mentally slacking for a second, you will be outplayed. Even the DI system speaks to this idea of having to think at an enhanced speed. Rather than just holding in the opposite direction of where you were launched like a brain-dead troglodyte, you instead need to think about the angle you're being hit, and where you have to hold to extend the distance you need to be launched. But that doesn't mean inputting these things are difficult. What's great about platform fighters is that they're more about the difficulty of thinking what to do, instead of thinking how to do it. Struggling to wave dash for 20 minutes isn't fun, but in Rivals, wave dashing is so easy, which is a good thing since it gets you straight onto learning about mind games instead of staying on learning how to be reverse. Dan takes advantage of everything a platform fighter is meant to be, which really speaks to his skill as a game designer. Rivals has a design philosophy based around having unique and readable characters. All the characters have such flair to everything they do, and I'm not even going to begin to talk about the moveset design because I'd be here all day if I did. But if you would like to hear about that, Adam Kara did a great job explaining it in his video, so I'll leave a link to that in the description. Just make sure to watch this first, please. I'm poor. But back to the characters' designs. When you're moving fast enough, colour stops mattering, which requires emphasis on silhouette so you know where everything is. And in a movement-focused fighting game, with an emphasis on going fast, silhouettes start to really matter. But readability isn't the only thing that silhouettes are useful for. They also help to communicate a character's playstyle and personality. For example, Maple's hunched over and thin to communicate that she's always ready for action and can move at a moment's notice. Aether is giant and lumbering to communicate his heavy and slow hits. Abza is snooty and stands up tall as if she's above you, which is also coincidentally the best place for Abza to be, zoning you safely from the sky. And even Forsburn, whose silhouette is garbage, is actually intentionally hard to read because his playstyle focuses around deception. Which I'd also like to say is the only time I've seen a deception-based character work well in a fighting game without getting predictable after like a couple games. Also, silhouettes is an area where Rivals' use of original characters is actually extremely useful, since they can be built from the ground up focused on silhouettes rather than redesigning them to have a more readable silhouette. They also don't have any ties to existing franchises, and so they can have more ambitious movesets. And I know I already said I'm not going to talk about movesets, but I do desperately want to talk about one thing that I think is really great and should be done more. Rivals isn't a game about using your resources to upgrade yourself, but a game about using your resources to side-grade yourself. Rivals, as you can tell from my previous statements, is a quality over quantity focused game. With only 12 characters and an additional 4 coming, it certainly doesn't have the most characters, but each character has so much depth that it matches the value of 1,000 characters. This is where Rivals comes out on top of other platform fighters, where others are forced into a quantity over quality deal because you can't just have a game with Mario, you gotta add Luigi and Wario, and you know what, while you're at it, why don't you just add Ryu and Sephiroth? But in Rivals, who do you have to ask for? They're all OCs, so it's pretty difficult to ask for your favourite character from the Rivals extended universe. If we're talking about Rivals from a gameplay perspective here, it's important to look at its defining gimmick that separates it from other platform fighters. The lack of a ledge. Rivals' lack of a ledge is paramount to the play of Rivals, with it aiding in keeping a consistent speed and never letting the game stop. In most platform fighters, they add a ledge, which allows you to grab onto the side of the stage when you're trying to recover and pull yourself up with one of many moves. Neutral get up attack, jump get up, and roll get up. You can also press down to drop from ledge followed by a jump to enter into a normal style of play, but this method of helping players get back to stage slows the game into a slog compared to before you get to the ledge, with a viable strategy just being to wait a bit and then getting up. Which, I understand adds more depth, but it's at the expense of my sanity. However, in Rivals, they're able to add just as much depth as a normal ledge, whilst not sacrificing any of the speed. It's phenomenal and keeps the game flowing in a really fluid way. This is all thanks to the wall jump. Every character in Rivals gets access to a wall jump that they can use when they get close to a wall. Also, Rivals does wall jumps better than any other platform fighter, and you can't fight me on that. But this wall jump allows for a lot. You can use it to stall, but only for a very short amount of time, which doesn't let it stall for an obnoxious amount of time, but does allow it to stall for long enough to punish your opponent's mistake. You can not wall jump to get to a stage faster, which however could leave you wide open to an attack. You could use it to wall jump and then double jump so you don't go into freefall, and then punish your opponent with an attack, which your opponent could possibly predict and hit you out of, leaving you without a double jump. And then there's the added bonus of character-specific recovery options, which adds even more depth. Honestly, it's insane how much Rivals was able to cram into these without using a standard ledge, and in the process, sped up the game tenfold. Speaking of keeping up the pace, Rivals' shield mechanics are spot on. Instead of using a normal shield which keeps you stuck in place and slows down the game, Rivals instead incentivizes you to use movement as your shield, and only when you're sure that an opponent is going to hit you to use a parry, which holds your opponent in place for a split second, allowing you to set up a combo if you ever, which is insanely cool because it encourages risky but calculated play, which is cool. And yes, I am aware that this was not intentional, and the only reason it originated was because Dan didn't feel like doing grabs, and without grabs you can't have a shield. But that doesn't negate the positive effect the parry system had on Rivals, and it's one of the areas I think that Rivals 2 is going to come up short, unfortunately. But aside from that, Rivals 2 is gonna slap. Speaking of where Rivals 2 will come up short, let's talk about the casual features, particularly Workshop. Workshop is an area of Rivals that has limitless potential, and I could honestly spend hours having fun with. It's full to the brim with characters and game modes, and could supply a casual with enough content to never have to buy another game, even if they don't know how to wall jump. I know a lot of pros hate Workshop because it has too much of a focus on repetitive jokes and Ronald McDonald, but what you have to remember is that for every player that plays Workshop 100% Decrepit Fox for an hour is another person that could possibly end up falling in love with Rivals mechanics and gameplay. Rivals' Workshop also shows us the devs team's close and encouraging relationship with the fanbase, since we can see them adopting 4 of the Workshop characters to become official Rivals characters. They even took on the developers of those characters to become official Rivals developers, which I honestly think is heartwarming and deserves a 10 out of 10. Now that I mentioned Rivals casual game modes, that reminds me of a certain one. This mode is extremely addictive and will keep you playing until you've unlocked all the runes. However, after some time it feels like you've hit a brick wall that says no fun past this point, and you hit this slow, repetitive phase of just hitting one-shot enemies and staying in the light. It stops feeling like you're pursuing this valiant and great goal of unlocking all the runes to get a higher level, and starts to feel more like you're just going through the motions. That is until you try a new character. Yeah, Rivals! But anyway, yeah, that's the one flaw of Abyss mode. Speaking of flaws, story mode exists. I honestly think this should just be purged from Rivals completely. There are reviews on Steam that say it actually made people like the game less in its entirety after playing it. Story mode's plot is so brain-numbingly bad that it rivals even the room. It makes no sense, and at the end of the story, instead of giving us an answer to the giant tentacles of darkness fucking up Aether for no reason, they just all say, oh, I don't fucking know what happened there, let's just all go out our days. It's so insanely bad. And its rating seems like the kind of shit a toddler would write, save for a couple multiple syllable words. And that's not even mentioning how bad the character arcs were. The closest thing we got to actual characters were Forsburn and Zetterburn having a kind of Loki 4 relationship, but they're both pricks. And at the end, when there's unresolved tension between them and it feels like it's gonna come to this great and emotional climax, they just stand around and fight a fucking tentacle monster that Zetterburn had no reason to even care about, since his only reaction with it was one fake arcane that he dealt with in a matter of seconds. There's also a huge disconnect between story and gameplay, and they even pull the whole winning the game, losing the cutscene trick that everyone actually hates. You'll be going about your day in the forest as Maple canonically, but trying to fight off 50 abyss creatures gameplay-wise. Just play the story, you'll see what I mean. Oh wait, no, don't play the story, because it literally just makes the characters less likable. All the characters are given vague personalities with their silhouettes, idle poses, and taunts, so you're free to assume their personality using your imagination, which leads to you creating idealized versions of them in your head, which isn't that good of a way of making three-dimensional characters, but it is a way. However, with the story mode, because there's no character arcs, all the characters get cemented as assholes and stay as assholes for the whole game, with the worst of them being Zetterburn, who is literally set up as a racist and never becomes not racist. The only one who is not a terrible person is ironically Forsburn. In conclusion, Rivals of Aether is an incredible, free-flowing game that really makes you feel like a Rivals of Aether. I rate it 9 out of 10. Ah shit, I forgot to talk about something. How could I be such a fool? How could I be so stupid as to not talk about Rivals' greatest game mode, Tether Ball. What a nice game mode with a ball and the tether and all. Best game mode. Game of the year, nothing better than Rivals of Tether. 11 out of 10 in game of the year. And no one's forgetting about Rivals of Tether.